Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village surrounded by lush green hills and tall trees, there lived a woman named Fatima. Known for her beauty and kindness, she was especially beloved as the village's milk seller. Every morning, Fatima would be in her backyard, preparing milk to sell to the villagers. One sunny morning, as Fatima was making milk in her big, beautiful bowl, something unexpected happened. Tano and a few villagers quietly entered her home and walked straight to the backyard without making any noise. They wanted to see how Fatima prepared her famous milk. Just as they stepped into her backyard, they were shocked by what they saw. Their eyes widened and they gasped in disbelief. Fatima was pressing milk from her breast into a big bowl. She did this every day to sell milk to the villagers. One of the villagers shouted, "Fatima, what are you doing?" They all stood there stunned. The milk they had loved so much was not cow milk at all. It was Fatima's breast milk. Tano stepped forward and said, "I told you all that Fatima's milk isn't from cows. It's from her own breasts." The villagers were shocked and didn't know what to say. Some felt very angry, disgusted, and betrayed. They couldn't believe they had been drinking Fatima's breast milk for years. They couldn't understand why Fatima would do such a thing. They all stood there, staring at her, trying to make sense of what they had just seen. The remaining villagers were furious when they learned the truth. "How could you trick us like this?" One shouted. They felt cheated and betrayed. Some of them picked up sticks and stones, ready to punish Fatima. "You lied to us?" Another yelled. Fatima, scared and shaking, tried to explain, "Please listen to me. I have a reason for what I did," she pleaded, holding up her hands. But the villagers were too angry to listen. They waved their sticks and raised their stones, their faces full of anger and confusion. "Why would you do this?" A woman cried. "We trusted you." Just then, someone threw a stone. It hit Fatima on the head, and she fell to the ground, bleeding. The villagers gasped, realizing what had happened. "Stop this madness!" someone shouted. At that moment, the village elders arrived. They saw the chaos and quickly stepped in. "Enough," one elder commanded, raising his hand. The crowd quieted down, still breathing heavily with anger. "Let her speak," another elder said firmly. "We need to hear her side of the story." The villagers reluctantly lowered their weapons, and the elders helped Fatima to her feet. Blood trickled down her face as she looked at the villagers with sad eyes. The crowd murmured, uncertain and still upset, but they stepped back to give her space. Now it was time for Fatima to explain why she had done what she did. With a heavy heart, Fatima began to tell her story. She looked at the villagers, her voice trembling. "You all know me," she started. "You remember when I was happy with my husband, Dogo, and our 7 children. We were a loving family." The villagers nodded, remembering the old days. Fatima continued her story, recalling the days when life was full of joy and laughter. "Dogo and I were so happy," she said, a faint smile appearing as she remembered. "Our 7 children brought us so much joy. But then everything changed." Her face darkened with sorrow as she recounted the tragic events. "It started with our youngest son, Tar," she said. "He fell ill, and despite everything we did, he couldn't be saved. He was so small, so full of life. Losing him broke our hearts." The villagers listened, feeling the weight of her grief. Not long after, Fatima continued, "Dogo went out to the farm. He was always strong and hardworking, but that day, a big tree fell on him. He didn't come home. I was devastated." A hush fell over the crowd as Fatima spoke. The villagers remembered the day Dogo died, a day that shook the entire community. "People began to talk," she said, her voice low. "They whispered that I was cursed, that I was the cause of all these tragedies. Fatima paused, her eyes welling up with tears. Then, one by one, 4 more of my children died. Each loss was like a piece of my heart being torn away. I was left with only 2 children, struggling to keep going. People avoided us, afraid that whatever was happening would spread to them. The villagers hung their heads, some ashamed of how they had treated her. With no support and no way to earn a living, I was desperate. Fatima said, I felt so alone, abandoned by everyone I knew. The pain in Fatima's voice was clear. Her life had been full of love and happiness, but it had all been stripped away, leaving her isolated and desperate. The villagers began to see the full extent of her suffering, and their anger started to fade, replaced by a somber understanding. Fatima's voice trembled as she continued her tale. After losing so much, I tried to find a way to survive. I thought maybe if I cooked food and sold it in the market, I could make a living. But no one wanted to buy from me. The villagers listened, recalling how they had avoided her stall in the market. People whispered behind my back, Fatima said. They called me a witch. They said that if anyone ate my food, they would be cursed or have bad luck. It hurt so much to hear those words, to see people walk by and avoid me like I was a plague. Desperation set in as Fatima struggled to provide for her remaining children. I tried doing small chores for the few people who still spoke to me, she continued. I cleaned houses, washed clothes, and even cleared weeds. But they wouldn't let me near their kitchens or children. They were scared of me, scared of what they thought I might do. Despite her efforts, Fatima's situation only grew worse. The little money she earned was not enough to feed her family. We were hungry all the time, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. There were days when we had nothing to eat. My children looked up at me with sad, hungry eyes, and I felt so helpless. The villagers shifted uncomfortably, remembering how they had shunned her. Then my last daughter, my sweet little girl, grew weaker and weaker, Fatima whispered. We had so little food, and she was so small. One day, she just couldn't hold on anymore. She died in my arms, hungry and cold. A heavy silence fell over the crowd as Fatima spoke of her daughter's death. The villagers felt the weight of their actions, realizing how they had contributed to her suffering. They had pushed her away, believing the worst about her. And now they saw the consequences of their rejection. Fatima stood before them, a grieving mother who had lost everything. Her story was one of sorrow and desperation, and the villagers began to understand the depth of her pain. They had treated her as an outcast, and now, faced with the truth, they felt a deep sense of remorse. That was how the story of how Fatima started selling her breast milk began. After losing everything, Fatima felt utterly lost. With her children gone and the villagers' rejection still fresh, she had nowhere to turn. One day, in a moment of desperation, she decided to visit the old woman she had met before, hoping for some kind of help. Fatima traveled to the old woman's home, a small, mysterious hut on the edge of a distant village. The old woman welcomed her in, her eyes full of knowing and kindness. "What brings you here, my dear?" she asked, her voice soft yet powerful. Fatima, with tears in her eyes, told the old woman about her struggles. She spoke of her losses, the villagers' accusations, and how they shunned her. "I have nothing left," Fatima said, her voice breaking. "I can't keep living like this. I need help, anything that can save me." The old woman listened carefully, then nodded slowly and said, "There is something you can do. It might sound strange, but it's a way to survive and even get back at those who wronged you." She leaned in closer and whispered, "You can sell your breast milk, but not just any milk. You'll add a special ingredient that will make it irresistible." Fatima looked confused and a bit scared. "Sell my breast milk?" she asked, unsure. "And what is this special ingredient?" The old woman smiled gently. Yes, your own milk. As for the ingredient, it's something harmless but magical. It will make your milk taste so good that people won't be able to resist it. They will come to you, desperate for more. It's a way to survive, and maybe, in a way, to teach them a lesson for treating you so poorly. Fatima hesitated. The idea felt strange and wrong, but she had nothing left to lose. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted. What if it makes things worse? The old woman reached out and touched Fatima's hand. It's a harmless thing, she assured her. You're not hurting anyone. It's just milk, but it will give you power, a way to make them see you differently. Sometimes, in desperate times, we must do things we never imagined. With a heavy heart and nowhere else to turn, Fatima agreed. She returned to her village and began the strange new business of selling her breast milk. As the old woman had promised, it was irresistible. People came from far and wide to buy it, and soon Fatima was making enough money to support herself. Her newfound success didn't go unnoticed. The villagers, who once shunned her, were now curious about the mysterious milk that everyone seemed to crave. Some began to question their previous judgments and visited Fatima to see if the milk was truly as special as they had heard. As they tasted the milk, they couldn't deny its richness and flavor, which was unlike anything they had ever experienced. Gradually, Fatima's situation improved. She was able to feed herself and provide for the few remaining family members. The villagers who had once scorned her began to approach her with a mix of apology and admiration. They offered words of regret for their earlier treatment and sought forgiveness for their harshness. Yet, the scars of her past remained. The pain of losing her family and the stigma of her past lingered in her heart. While some villagers extended their support, others remained wary. Fatima's success was a reminder of how deeply hurtful prejudice could be and how quickly circumstances could change. Fatima's story spread beyond the village. It became a tale of survival and resilience, teaching others about the importance of compassion and understanding. The village itself transformed as people became more empathetic and willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. As for Fatima, she continued her work, but now it symbolized not just survival, but also the strength and perseverance of the human spirit. Her milk became a symbol of both her hardship and her triumph. She never forgot her lost children and the love she once had, but she found a way to move forward with dignity. And so, the story of Fatima and her milk served as a poignant lesson for everyone in the village and beyond, to never judge others too harshly, to offer kindness instead of scorn, and to remember that even in the darkest times, there is hope for redemption and renewal. I hope this continuation aligns with your vision for the story.